Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon at the Headwaters of the Comal. I'm Josh Hill, and this is we're the two archaeologists out here sort of managing the project. You guys joined us last week. We kind of gave a brief overview. Unfortunately, mostly everything was underwater due to the rain. But today we actually have a couple of features exposed. This one right here in Block D is what we refer to as a burned rock midden, or some people like to call it a concentration of burned rocks. And it's also, think of it as sort of a trash pit of sorts. What you have in here is as you can see, a great deal of burnt and fire-cracked limestone, supplemented with a lot of, we're getting a lot of lithic debris, which is, if you joined us last week, that's basically flake material from projectile points or knives or any sort of sharp implement that you would use in a cooking or hunting setting. As you can see, the archaeologists are very diligently troweling away in between the rocks so we can get kind of a better understanding of the depth, the size, and the density of what we're seeing out here. So this is it's very painstaking, and these guys are doing a very good job of kind of uncovering the rocks out here. And so, yeah, the rain has stopped, which is a plus. And so we've been able to kind of get moving a little bit more out here. And so if you join me, we're going to go on a brief walk around the site, kind of show you a few other things, and then we're going to transition into a really interesting segment with Mindy and Catherine, who will be joining us in a moment in the Amatera lab.
All right, walk this way.
So as you all can see, what you're looking at is the aftermath of 2.3 inches of rain that fell at the site in an hour period. We have rain gauges set up out here that showed us that 1 inch of rain fell in a total of 12 minutes out here. And the amount of rain does a serious amount of damage, as you can see. But fortunately, we've got some great crews out here who are working to kind of restore stability and keep us working and keep the dig going.
Unfortunately, though, that means that several blocks which were flooded last week are also still flooded, in particularly Block C, which is what you're going to see up on your left. And this is the block where we've been finding some really great features. A lot of cultural material has been coming out of this block. Unfortunately, it's still it was flooded out pretty bad, and it's still trying to dry out. So we are in the process of sort of obtaining some additional coverage to be able to sort of protect it from future rains. Since it's a very large block, we have to kind of sort of buy another one of those really large white tents, but in addition supplement it with some additional coverage to be able to sort of cover the entire block. But we're hoping to be able to get that up and running next week, and then hopefully by the next week's blog segment, this will be dried out, the cover will be up, and we'll be able to show you some of this great archaeology that we're having coming out of this block.
Yeah, and even, it's unfortunate that Block C has been shut down for the entire week, but that has given us an opportunity to open up another block, which we're walking around to here, excavation Block A. And it's actually really, really excellent because we were able to dig out 65 10-centimeter levels yesterday. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the metric system, that's a total of 20 feet that we excavated out of Block A. And some really interesting things came out of Block A. We're starting to kind of isolate out what we think is a late prehistoric component. It's denoted by, we had 4 ceramics come out. Unfortunately, we had no projectile points that could kind of attribute to that. But we're definitely on the lookout for some Perdiz arrow points. So if we can come across some of those, we feel pretty confident that we're coming down on a much later occupation than we had kind of thought might be out here, which is really excellent news. So as you can see, these guys are working pretty hard. We're going to leave them alone over there. But
if you come out for a tour, you'll be get a chance to walk by, get a chance to talk to the archaeologists, and ask questions, and get a closer look at what they're doing over there in Block A.
Okay, guys. Well, now you've had kind of been brought up to speed on the site out here, so now we're going to turn it over to Mindy, and we have Dr. Catherine Cycle, the Amatera Lab Director, and Mark Simon, a graduate student at Texas State University, out here kind of doing their thing. So.
All right, and here I'm going to step in, and essentially we're going to just do a little mini interview here with Kat, who's in charge of this entire operation. So, hi, Kat. How are you?
We're good.
All right. Last week we talked a little bit about sort of what we're doing with the artifacts after we excavate them. So we dig them out of the ground, we screen the dirt, we pull the artifacts, we collect them all, we put them into bags that look kind of like this, and then we send them to the lab for processing. And so today what we're going to do is describe what that means. What is processing and why we do it. So let's start with talking about what happens to these bags after they come into the lab and what you do with them step by step.
Of course. All right, so first thing we do once everything's been brought in is we actually sort through what sort of artifacts we can clean in which ways. Because certain things like bone, like faunal bone and shell and groundstone, we don't want to wet wash, but things like our lithics here,
our chert debris,
our lovely bifacial tool bases, and even our little prehistoric ceramics can be wet washed. So we divide everything up first, and then we set up stations. So we have obviously the wet washing side over here, and then we have the dry cleaning side over there.
The dry cleaning side.
Mark's working currently on what appears to be probably a hammerstone fragment or possibly a nutting stone. Part of the reason why we dry process hammerstones and nutting stones is because a lot of times when we get everything back to the office for analysis, what we want to do is potentially do residue analysis. So we don't want to wet wash things that might have residue on them, because if we do that, then the residue's gone and we can't do anything with it.
We can't do the analysis.
And then, of course, with the bone and shell and other really fragile materials, we don't want to wet wash those, because especially once we take them out of the ground and they start to dry out, we don't want to re-expose them to water because they'll start to degrade.
One of the things that's particularly about bone, correct me if I'm wrong, Kat, is that once it gets pulled, it's like excavating anything from a waterlogged area. Once it gets pulled from all the dirt that was previously protecting it and keeping it encased, the dirt itself would get wet, as it would, the soil would get rained on and things like that. So the dirt itself would get wet, but it wouldn't move very much. So the bone that's encased in all of that dirt wouldn't move either, and then it wouldn't have a chance to flake off and degrade. And so, but once we take it out of that protective layer of dirt, then additional sort of exposure to water would potentially flake off pieces of that bone. And the less bone there is, the less we have to work with, especially if there's bone segments where you can, if you can sort of do sort of funnel identification based off of one particular attribute from that bone. If that attribute is gone, then our identification is shot.
Exactly. And actually, we have here, so once all of the bone and shell is processed, we actually put them in plastic vials to protect them. So that's one thing we do to try to mitigate its change in environment.
Okay. So Kat, tell me a little bit about why we clean these artifacts after we put them in.
Well, especially in places like this, we have a lot of clay in the soils here. So a lot of it is so we can actually properly ID what's coming out of the ground. Because, sometimes little tiny ceramics like this get mistaken for pieces of sandstone debitage or lithic debris. Or in some cases, I've run into situations where I've had sandstone misidentified as ceramics. So unless we clean it, we don't actually know what we have. So a lot of times what we do, particularly with the wet washing, is we have these secondary trays where we take the bags, like this one, take the binder clip off, and we actually shake it out onto this tray to make sure, at least on initial sort of inspection, that maybe a little tiny shard of bone or some other material that should be processed differently isn't actually in the bag. So we sort of spread everything out and confirm, okay, yeah, it looks like everything in this bag, which is labeled lithics, is actually lithics. And so what we end up doing once we do that, to keep all this information on the trays, is we have these handy little lab ID tags. And so what we'll do is we'll actually take all the information off the bag, write it on the tag, then we stick them in these little plastic baggies, and so that way we can stick the plastic bags with the provenience information under the paper towel, so when we go to inventory everything after it's been dried on the drying racks over here, all the information associated with that material stays with it. So we might not retain the bags it came out of, because you don't really want to put clean artifacts in a dirty bag.
So swap out paper bags for plastic bags.
Yes, exactly. And we rebag everything and inventory everything after it's dried. And so we actually have, which is very luxurious in a field lab, we actually have a computer up there with a station to do exactly the inventorying process. So we can actually go up there and kind of have a look at what that looks like.
How about we go take care of that? So basically, we're kind of, everything's washed, it's dried, the provenience information is sort of associated with it. We have all that together. What happens after that?
Okay, so then we have to go to the stairs over here to get up to the computer. Or in the case of Mark, you just jump up on the ledge. But some of us are a little too short to do that. So we have some material here that has dried from yesterday. So as you can kind of see, we have some lithics, and you can see the little bag with the tags inside here. We have actually a rather nice piece of historic ceramic that came out of Block A.
Right at the top.
Right at the top,
Yep.
and my guess, Mindy can correct me on this, it looks like it's the top of a vase or an urn or some such.
I think it might be a flower pot.
Actually, that was something I didn't even think of, a decorative flower pot. So basically what would happen is Mark or myself will take those out and then put all of the relevant data into our database. And then at regular intervals, we take all the artifacts that have been inventoried and a copy of this database back to my lab in our main office, and I go through and check off that everything made it back to Austin safely, intact, and confirm that the database maintains some level of standardization, that all the information was entered as it has been done correctly.
So one of the things that we do, as far what's the most important thing that we're trying to assemble when we're excavating out here, is information. So believe it or not, sort of all of the excavations that are going on are really kind of fun and exciting, and we get a chance to find some really cool stuff out there. But really what we're trying to find is information. And the reason why we're so diligent about keeping track of where the artifacts come from is to be able to assemble that information. And then databases such as this is what helps us analyze the information after we collate it, collect it, making sure that we have all that information, all the provenience information, which is basically exactly where things were found.
And databases like this, after we're done with analysis, we use them to prepare this massive collection of material from this site and others for curation at a long-term storage facility.
Right. And then curation is one of those things that we also, many archaeologists do, because not only are we get a chance to get the first stab at doing analysis on this kind of information, but people down the road, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, even 50 years from now, have an opportunity to be able to pull these artifacts from the curation facility and do brand new types of analysis that we haven't even thought of yet. So curation is the method through which we can sort of take old information that was collected a long time ago, try to reanalyze it, ask new questions of that information, and be able to try to get more complete and complex answers to those to those questions.
And they make really great museum exhibits.
And they make great, yes, exactly. That's wonderful. We can actually get a chance to pull some of the really great stuff and get a chance to. So if you go to the museum, various museums, you see museum displays. They pull and display the sort of the prettiest or the most sort of revealing of the artifacts. But behind those displays are thousands of racks of artifacts like this.
Lithic debris.
Lithic debris, exactly. So let me see if I got another question for you. So how do you keep track of everything, other than, so we kind of went over the tags a little bit.
All right. So basically, from the tags, all the information on the tags is actually input into our database, computerized database here, and so pretty much how we track that material is basically we take it from the bags to the tags to the database. So we're pretty diligent to make sure there's no transposition errors or any sort of confusion on what that information is. So some of you who have been around archaeology lab folk or will be maybe in the future, you'll notice we have a tendency to be really picky about how things are recorded. So all the tags are very specific about, which block did it come from, which unit, which level, and all of that, of course. And we make sure we track it from beginning to end. We also track who excavated it, what date it was excavated on, because if we have a question, we can go back to that person and say, hey, what's the deal with this? Or, why is this? Do you know why this bag is actually empty now? Was it maybe something that we thought was an artifact that got discarded? Or, we have this thing in the database, and when we go through to do curation later, sometimes things get misplaced. Maybe they're still on somebody's desk from doing analysis. Sometimes they actually get lost, which is rare, but it does happen. And so we track that in the spreadsheet as well. Anytime, like if something appears to be missing, we note it, and we know what date we noticed that as well.
There's many circumstances where a specialist would come and pull portions of our collection to be able to do special analysis, either on tools, ceramics, blades, special materials like obsidian. Someone would come and be able to do analysis on particular portions of that collection, and we also have to keep track of all that information as sort of who has it, how long they have it, when it's coming back, to just make sure that when we do finally submit that collection for curation, we have all the information, everything's been returned, and we know what's going in. So
that goes in the master database too.
Exactly. Yes.
In addition to sign in and sign out paperwork that specialists also fill out.
Okay. So. Great. All right. I think thank you very much, Kat, for the little primer on our field lab. I think it's time for us to move on to our next segment and to question and answer. So let's go ahead and move on out to the daylight. Get a chance to come out.
So we've been doing tours out here for
a
few weeks now, and we get a lot of different questions out here when we're working at the site. Josh, what's the coolest thing you found out here, or what kind of work are you doing here? And there's no real quick answer to that. The answer, really, we do a lot of stuff out here. We're looking our different blocks that we have open. We're targeting different what we call living surface or potential occupations, trying to track prehistoric lifeways through time, which basically is, who lived here, when, where, why, how, what were they eating, what were they doing, and sort of some of the stuff that Kat touched on inside with their lithic technology or, tool making. That sort of tells us a lot of different things that we're trying to answer out here as far as what were they hunting with, for example. Were they hunting with bow and arrows? That's what we're looking for over here in Block A. Arrow points that'll tell us that we had a much later occupation. You go over to Block D, we're looking in the Burn Rock Midden. We're getting a lot of different broken knives and, larger points that would kind of tell us maybe that some processing is going on over there, or a lot of discard is going on over there. Animal bones, are there a concentration of them? Is that a sign of cooking or processing or something like that? So, there is a lot of going on out here. and we're gonna, we're just scratching the surface, and we're gonna continue to expand our blocks and to look at different things out here. So
we have several, sort of when we started this project, we have several research questions that we sort of posed that we thought we might be able to potentially answer with the data that we're collecting from this site. And some of the research questions we have are pretty general, like who was here and how long they were here, and but we're also trying to get a chance to answer some more detailed research questions about the cultures and societies of the people who are out here. So not just talking about, what they ate or how they cooked it, or, just living the daily mechanics of life. We're also trying to see if we might be able to get information that can answer questions about their culture, the society, how they were related to each other, what their sort of movement patterns were like. And all of those questions change depending on the time period that we're talking about. Late sort of Paleo-Indian peoples had a different lifestyle than archaic peoples did, and archaic peoples had a different lifestyle than late prehistoric peoples did. So we're trying to sort of collect all that information, compare that, not sort of all these different groups, how they were living, how they were utilizing this site over time, over a long period of time, and capturing those specific pieces of information to be able to answer those kinds of more more complex questions, other than just the mechanics of daily life, which is something that we get a lot. And remember that what we're recovering is only a small percentage of the resources, the cultural material that people were utilizing over time. So all the lithics that we're pulling out was only a small fragment of the stuff that they used, but have since degraded to the point where we can't even collect it anymore. Anything made of wood is gone. Anything made of plant material, gone. And so we're trying to infer the other pieces of cultural material from the pieces of cultural material that we can get, that we can recover. So those kinds of research questions that we ask are sort of like trying to get to that part. So we only have a small piece of the puzzle. We're trying to get, sort of infer from that what the larger piece, looks like over time.
And guys, like I said, we'll be out here every Thursday morning at 10 o'clock, so please tune in, check us out. We'll be here. Also, log into our website. You can have all the videos. We have our weekly updates out there. So this, like Mindy was saying, we're just getting more and more pieces of the puzzle every week. So tune in, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.